Alright, yeah, how's it going, guys? Welcome to some more Magic Arena, and today is a good day because it's Subscriber Deck Day. So, what are we playing today? Well, we're going into a green-red Gruul Aggro list that was submitted to us by Thoughts in Flight, so thank you very much for sending the list. It looks pretty sweet. It's actually a list that I've tried to build before, and I never quite got it there. It always seems to kind of run out of steam. But this one is interesting. It looks like it's trying to beat other creature decks with its aggressiveness, and it has a little bit of late game stuff that I can really get behind as well. So we're going to try this one out. It also has a little bit of a sideboard, but it's not complete. So we're going to play a few games with this, and then I'm going to go and see if I can make any changes, any improvements. And since we've got a little bit of a sideboard, I'm going to assume that they want me to finish off the sideboard as well, so we can do a little bit of a kind of deck tech kind of building of that one, shall we? So before we get into it, let's actually look at the deck. The idea is that we're going to aggro our opponent out, which means we have to kill them as quickly as possible. So we start off on turn 1 with our Fanatical Firebrands, which are a 1/1 with haste, a staple of the mono-red burn list. So if they're in there for aggro, then obviously they should probably be in here. I'm not sure if it is necessarily the correct inclusion in this list, because we can go into the late game, so we might have that edge over mono-red or other decks that try to beat burn anyway. But we're going to try it out anyway. We can also sacrifice it to deal 1 damage to any target, so it is one way to get any threats out of the way so we can keep smoking our opponent, hitting them in the face. Speaking of hitting him in the face and getting things out of the way, we do have 2 different removal spells in here. We have Titanic Brawl, which is an interesting one, actually. It works really well with the deck. It's a 2-mana instant speed fight spell, so our creature deals damage to their creature. However, it costs 1 less mana if we actually target a creature we control that has a 1/1 counter on it. Now, a lot of our creatures actually do have that. We've got Pelt Collector that gets pumped with counters, Growth Chamber Guardian adapts, Zertar Goblin riots a counter onto itself, Spellbreaker. The only downside is that if you put a counter on these creatures, they're not going to have haste, which means we slow the game down. So we've really got to balance that when we actually decide on whether or not Titanic Brawl as a 1-mana or 2-mana spell is really worth it. However, we do have another removal spell, which is Thrash Threat, which I think is arguably strictly better, I would say, than Titanic Brawl. Almost strictly better anyway, if you want to get really into the nitty-gritty. It's not entirely strictly better because this one can be 1 mana, so it could be cheaper, which means it's not always better. However, 2-mana removal spell, target creature you control deals damage to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. So we can hit planeswalkers as well, which is quite nice with this one, and Titanic Brawl doesn't allow us to do that. Also, if we don't actually find a use for Thrash, then we have Threat as well, which allows us to use our removal spells as basically adding a creature to the board. So for 4 mana, we get a 4/4 green and red beast creature token with trample. So a legitimate threat for threat, which is kind of cool. So that's essentially the removal. We did go past some of the early stuff as well. Pelt Collector is a 1-mana 1/1. We get this down early. Doesn't have haste, however, 9 times out of 10 we're going to follow that up with a 2-drop that could potentially have haste. And if we bring in any creature that has a higher power than the Pelt Collector, it gets a 1/1 counter on it. And if it becomes a 4/4 with counters, then it actually gets Trample, which means that, yet again, it is a late game threat if it isn't dealt with early. So we can go Pelt Collector turn 1, something like Growth Chamber Guardian or Zertar Goblin on turn 2, which pumps the Pelt Collector. Turn 3, we yet again have another way to pump the Pelt Collector. And then on our 4 and 5s, we do it yet again. We got the Rekindling Phoenix and the Skargan Hellkites, which bring Pelt Collector right up to the 4 power that it needs, the 4 counters to give it trample. So it's really nicely curved in terms of the creatures to enable Pelt Collector here. It's a solid addition. Spellbreaker is the 3-mana 3/3 with riot and trample, and as long as it's your turn, it gets hexproof, which is very nice. And we do as well, which means we have protection from Settle the Wreckage. So we're not entirely bothered about swinging all in our opponents, so it's something to keep in mind there. 3 copies of Rekindling Phoenix is our resilient creature in the late game. 4 mana 4/3 with flying, so it gets through most creatures with its evasion. And if our opponent tries to kill it, then it actually turns into a 0/1 red elemental creature token, which essentially demands a 2-for-1 unless your opponent is running Exile like Lava Coil or Vraska's Contempt. Those are about the only good ways of dealing with a Rekindling Phoenix. Otherwise, it's coming back with haste, and it's dealing that damage anyway. Skagan Hellkite is the top end for our deck. A 5 mana 4/4 with Riot and Flying, so we can either give this a haste, which means it's a 4/4 haster, which, I mean, Glory Ringer was played as a staple, so why not this one? However, that did have Exert to deal extra damage as it swung in, so there is that, I suppose. But we can also make this a 5/5 if we want to go longer into the game as well, and by doing that we enable its ability, its activated ability, which is 3 in a red to essentially twin bolt any of the targets on your opponent's side, so we can hit planeswalkers, players, and creatures, but only if it has a counter on it. There is no way to actually add counters to any creatures on here, which might be a problem, but I'm not sure that's going to be the case, to be honest. I think as long as you're careful with how you use your riots, you're going to be able to enable Skagan Hellkite when it actually matters. Finally, if we're up against the control matchups, in Game 1 we have 3 copies of Rhythm of the Wild. Also has the added ability of giving our riot creatures double riot, because the effect actually stacks, which is very nice indeed, and it stops our creatures from being countered. So all of our hasty shenanigans that our opponent's trying to counter no longer actually happens with Rhythm of the Wild, and we give them double riot, which means Skagan Hellkite could still be that 5/5 with haste and a counter on it, which is pretty sweet indeed. Mana base speaks for itself. It's a nice even balance, and the colours actually match that as well, so it's very good. 4 Stomping Grounds, 4 Rootbound Crags, 8 forests, and 8 mountains. So let's go try this out, see what it is maybe lacking, or if it's not lacking anything at all, then I guess we'll just change the sideboard, see what the matchups are. So we're going to take this one into the best of ones, because it is not currently set up for best of 3. So we're going to play best of ones, and then I'll probably change the sideboard up to showcase what a best of 3 version of this might end up looking like. So let's get into the games, and I will see you there. Alrighty then, we're in, and this is a worrying hand. This is too top-heavy for my liking. It depends entirely on the matchup, you know, Rhythm on 3 into Phoenix on 4, 5, and 6 isn't the worst thing in the world, you know, giving these things haste right out the gate, but I don't know. Best of 1's quite an aggressive format. If it was like best of 3, I could see keeping this, almost. We're going to mulligan this one, though. And no creatures. Ooh dear. I'm seeing a theme. I am seeing a theme. Alright, we're going to have to keep this one. Bottom anything that's not a land. Yeah, really unfortunate there, actually. Ouch. Alright, well, pass the turn. We're still not out of this. But it's going to be touch and go, I would say. Yes, there we go. That's what I really, really needed to see. Alright, so Growth Chamber Guardian. Will it survive? Nope. Alrighty then. And more non-creature stuff. I'm thinking that we have too many of these fight effects right off the bat. It's not the worst in the world if your hand contains too many 4-drops in creature form, but when you have too many cards that require something on board to work, then you have a little bit of a problem. So, we got a Zertar Goblin. Okay. Well, we can turn this into a 3/3, or I could haste it through as a 2/2. I think I'll haste it through as a 2/2. The only worry is shock. They had Lightning Strike anyway. Alright, so it was never going to survive. My thinking was there, if we hasted the 2/2, we could swing. They probably wouldn't block, and then Thrash would be able to kill Electromancer anyway. Wow, okay. So we have 24 lands in here, so this is not indicative of a bad mana base. This is just being extremely unlucky. And honestly, this might be time to scoop. This is actually a nightmare scenario. Yep. Alright, well, game 1 down. Oh dear. Oh dear. Alright. This hand is actually what I'm looking for. We have a turn 1, turn 2 play. Hopefully we get a turn 3 play, which might end up just being the thrash threat to allow these guys to get through again. And then we have a turn 4 rekindling Phoenix, so this looks good to me. Can't really see a reason not to do this. Alright, well, get swinging. Opponent immediately thinks we're mono red, which might have a little bit of tilt factor. We'll see. And we actually get to drop down a Zertar Goblin without having to shock in the Stomping Ground, which is quite nice. That allows us to play this on turn 3. Tapped. I'm going to haste this in because I think this is mono blue tempo. And I want to pressure them early. And most of the stuff isn't going to interact with the Zertar the way our opponent wants it to. Because we have a thrash threat to kill their 2-drop if it comes to it. It's like if they go Merfolk Trickster to try and block the Goblin, we have instant speed Thrash to just immediately blow them out. So let's go do that, shall we? I'm hoping that's their plan. Yep. Alright. So, Thrash, you, fight you. Pretty sweet. And hit you for 3. Now we get that Stomping Ground tapped. And we have Rekindling Phoenix next turn, potentially. Ooh. Zertar Goblin first. Now, they do run Essence Captures, and obviously Wizard's Retorts, so I might want to try and get this Rekindling Phoenix into a safer position. So I'm going to swing now. See if I can get them to tap down for a Merfolk Trickster, which then allows the Rekindling Phoenix to come down safely. Cool. And that's going to be insanely hard for them to deal with. It's a constant blocker for us if we want it, and it goes right through a Tempest Djinn as well. So I think this game is pretty much locked up. Yep. Alright, that's what the deck is trying to do. Very good indeed. Let's go for another game. Alright, we have a turn 2, a turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 play if we get a land. We're on the draw, which is less than ideal. I would rather this be a Pelt Collector being on the draw. But depending on what our opponent's playing, we might still be able to get through with a Firebrand anyway. Yeah, we'll take this. This isn't the worst. Let's move our cards to where I realistically see myself playing them, which is around this mana cost. Alright, so land Firebrand. Against a green deck, we should be okay. Could be a mirror match, potentially. You don't really have to worry about Wilderness Reclamation decks all that much. Oh, it's actually tokens. Or maybe mid-range? One or the other. That's unfortunate, actually. Getting through this Thorn Lieutenant's going to be problematic until we get to the Spellbreaker. Because I offer my opponent a token if I thrash them. So, do we go... I think we just go Growth Chamber Guardian with the Forest. And pass. I'm not going to play the Stomping Grounds and shock them, because there is a potential that I get to Rootbound Crag off the top. So I might not necessarily have to take this damage. Thorn Lieutenant is very good at stopping aggro decks, so it's pretty much why my opponent's playing these. They are a problem. They are going to get in for 2, though, which means I get to get in for 4, or trade off with a Thorn Lieutenant, which I'm happy to do. What's green and... 1 green and 1 white, what could they do? They could put a counter on Thorn Lieutenant and untap it with Stony Strength. Titanic Brawl, eh? Yeah, well, I'm just gonna shock this in, because I think I'm gonna adapt with the Growth Chamber Guardian. And if they don't block, then so be it. I maybe take that opportunity to play Spellbreaker as a 4/4 instead then. Yeah, I think that might be the call. Progress the board. with the cards that we have in hand. They're not going to be wiping the board from us. The worst they're going to do is like Settle the Wreckage, and Spellbreaker shuts that off entirely. There's a Beast Whisperer, and that is absolutely going to get Thrash Threated. That cannot be allowed to live. Opponent can't attack in anymore. Alright. So, my turn. A Rekindling Phoenix is interesting. So, I think I'm going to Shock in the Stomping Ground. This allows me to use Titanic Brawl and adapt the Growth Chamber Guardian. So I'm going to swing in like this. See how our opponent wants to block. And then we have the Titanic Brawl on 1 mana, which lines up perfectly with these Growth Chamber Guardians. Alright, so adapt. Turn it into a 4/4 and get ourselves the next Growth Chamber. And then offer a fight with Spellbreaker on Thorn Lieutenant. We give them a token, but we save our Guardian. And Spellbreaker still gets through with the 4 Trample. We can even sack the Firebrand if we really wanted to get rid of the Elf as a blocker next turn, which is a potential choice for us. Elvish Rejuvenator. Alright. So they do get to draw cards with Beast Whisperer, but I think the blowout on that one was the proper play, because it was slowing us down with all of our creatures. We couldn't really do anything. This way, they don't really have any profitable blocks. I can Thrash Threat and Growth Chamber next turn. I can even Firebrand and kill Llanowar Elves. There's 1 less blocker. I think that's probably the best value I'm going to get out of this one. Everything dies to Thrash Threat, so I don't need the extra point anywhere. If I was to swing in, though, I'm going to be killing Beast Whisperer, so I guess it trades off with everything anyway. So maybe not offering... They've got enough mana, so the elf mana doesn't matter. Yeah, not actually just straight up killing it. I might get an extra point in by just attacking normally. That's interesting. Alright, so we fight and then play Guardian, I think. It's not technically fighting either, it's just dealing damage. So these guys don't go any lower. Yeah, I think we fight here, because then I get to go in with the Firebrand and it actually at least trades with something. And we could opt for the Firebrand for an extra point here, or we get the Growth Chamber Guardian down as another 4/4. I think the other 4/4 is actually more important. Or at least a 2/2, because it still goes right through these. Yeah, I'm really happy for that, especially if they're just... Wow, they're just taking it all. Okay. Play Guardian. And they're pretty much in chump blocks for the rest of the game, I imagine. If we get a land, we get to Hellkite with haste. And they have to block all damage from the Spellbreaker. This could be Conclave Tribunal on Spellbreaker. Maybe Seal Away. I don't see Seal Away that much anymore because Mortify is such a constant threat in the format right now. Enchantments like these just aren't good. But yeah, they get their hit. We can't really do anything about that. The main in our deck doesn't actually have enchantment hate. The sideboard did, though. Alright, well... If I do Firebrand, then I threaten lethal. I guess I should have Thrash Threated, actually. Oh no, I couldn't... Yeah, I had to adapt Growth Chamber to threaten lethal on 2 creatures, so... Yeah, that didn't work how I was hoping it would. Kind of. Let's just adapt this now. We were going to do it anyway. Yeah, I was only threatening actual lethal without the Thrash Threat, because I had to adapt the Growth Chamber to have 1 and the Firebrand dealing 5, so that the other one would get through and force these two to block. It kind of worked out exactly as I planned it. I'm getting my words jumbled, but yep, another victory. It's pretty good. This is what the deck is supposed to do. Alrighty then, we have Firebrand on 1, Guardian on 2. It's almost unfortunate to see 2 Guardians in hand, but then again, if we don't want to spend all of our mana on turn 3 to adapt, then we can at least play a Growth Chamber on 2, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but ideally you want one to pull the other to pull the other. Sometimes though, your opponent just lava coils or shocks them away and you don't get that opportunity, so it completely depends on what our opponent's doing as to whether this combination of cards is a good thing or not. Still haven't seen a Pelt Collector at all, which is interesting. So our opponent is on red, which says to me that I should probably Zertar with a counter, which means that they have to use one of their good removal spells on it, as opposed to just a shock, which I'm sure my opponent can do right now. So we kind of slow down the game, but we get a bigger threat on board. Oh, it's red-white. So this is like the Heroic Reinforcements kind of build. So yeah, we get a premium removal spell out of our opponent this way. And that's a Lava Coil that's not being used on my Growth Chamber Guardian. So swing for 1. And play Growth Chamber Guardian. We have the Adapt on that if we want it. If we draw a land, then we have the Phoenix. Ooh, Spellbreaker. My opponent never blocks the Guardian, though. So I think I have to use the Thrash threat to kill Pridemate before it gets out of hand. Which means I should do it now so I can get my Firebrand damage in. I really would like to progress the board, but a Pridemate's not something that we can deal with once it starts getting its counters on it. Once it goes above about 4, it's just impossible to kill. Tithe Taker. Opponent also missed their land drop, but so did we. We could swing in with the Growth Chamber, see if they offer the block. If they do, we adapt. If they don't, then we've got either the Growth Chamber Guardian or Spellbreaker as a 4/4. Yeah, I think we take Spellbreaker as a 4/4. It just goes right through the Tithe Taker now. This deck is insane when it's just left to do its own thing. Justice Strike. Okay. We've got a Zertar Goblin. Again, I don't really want to run anything into the Tithe Taker. We can, of course, kill this and he'll get a Spirit, but I want him to block and get that Spirit first, I think. So I'm just going to offer the 4/4 potential again. Otherwise he takes 2 and goes down to 10. We put the pressure on that way. Yeah, so he's going to take it. I mean, the alternative is... Oh, he's good gaming. The alternative is we actually just Zertar Goblin and Firebrand. Which gets rid of the token as well. Yeah, let's do it. Let him have the token. And kill the token. We pretty much just rebuild completely as well. With another Zertar. With a counter. And Firebrand. So we're swinging for 4 next turn. Got a land? We're kind of winning this one because our opponent's mana screwed. Though, I mean, we're on the verge ourselves of being in the same situation. If we don't draw another land, we're going to be in real trouble. I need this Phoenix to come down. There we go. That's how Magic is played. Just get what you want and you'll win. Alright. 2 Lava Coils down. Means less ways of dealing with Phoenix. He has to kill it on my turn. Ooh, Ixalan's Binding. That's rough. So hopefully we don't draw into any of the other bindings, into the other phoenixes. Got Spellbreaker here. I think I'm going to haste this one through, put the pressure on. That's 4 points. We're getting to the point now where Firebrand can't push through, so I really want to get that damage in while I can and then sack it off if we need to. Resplendent Angel. See, my opponent, I don't think, can really afford to not block this Spellbreaker. So let's see if we can get that off of them. And then we have Guardian with, unfortunately, not Adapt next turn. Because we only have the one green mana, we're a bit colour screwed in that regard. I'll just play it out though. So all of their creatures up until this point, I was going to say all of their creatures up until this point haven't really been able to block a 4/4. In comes True Fire Guardian at the right time. I guess we adapt here. I'm going to attack with all, because I think he blocks the Guardian. Wow. Taking 4. Okay. Get another Growth Chamber. We can cast it because we just drew the Rootbound Crag. Hits us for 1, because he didn't block the Growth Chamber Guardian. Rootbound Crag. Growth Chamber. So we got 2 4/4s coming over. He's going to need some decent blocks for that. He's at like Resplendent Angel mana now. Pretty much. Like 1 land drop after he drops that. And he can start lifelinking it. Swings in. I think that is a concession, if I've ever seen one. Hopefully he's not just going to go land Star of Extinction. Fog you for a little while so I can get there. Doesn't look like it. We could get settled, I suppose. Yeah, let's not get settled, shall we? Angel of Grace. Wow. Okay. Opponent could be stabilizing. I mean, this does enable them to go right back up to 10. Yep. We will adapt, get our final Growth Chamber, play our final Growth Chamber. I'm just going to hold this land in hand as a bamboozle. So this thing needs to die before it can take his life total back to 10. So he either needs to kill it himself or survive this combat and have this angel die at the same time. It costs 6 in order to gain him the life. But yeah, at the moment... Ooh. Honor Guards doesn't have actual applications against our deck, I don't think. Oh my god, he's got the Lava Coil as well. Oh boy. Well, let's see if he swings. If he does, he potentially loses to any haste creature out of our deck. Yeah, we got the Skargan Hellkite, which is now threatening lethal. Because we don't actually have to swing in anymore. We can put a counter on the Hellkite. Which means that its Twin Bolt effect is active. So he needs to answer the Hellkite right now, or he's dead. Drops a land. You got another binding? Another Justice Strike would do it as well. Lava Coil wouldn't, but you've used 2 already, so... Oh, he's used 3 already. Likelihood of seeing that is not very high. I don't think they've got it. Unless they've got maybe another Angel of Grace. And then they can respond to my trigger. Nope, that's a tap out for a Serra Guardian. We ping our opponent. And that's game. Wow, that was really close. Unbelievably close. I wasn't expecting half of the tech that came in there. But yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Alrighty then, we're in, and we've got a pretty similar to every other game kind of hand. No Pelt Collector for turn 1, but we do have the Firebrand into the Growth Chamber into Spellbreaker, so there's no debate on this hand, it's great. So let's just go Mountain, and Firebrand and start swinging. Hey, I'm mono red. Make your plays as though that's the assumption. Hopefully they're incorrect. Alright. Well, we get more land. More land isn't terrible. We're going to swing first. See if we got a 1-mana removal spell out of them. They technically exist. Yeah, and then just play a Rootbound Crag into Growth Chamber Guardian. Pass the turn. So we have 2 options next turn, just based off of this hand alone. And that is to adapt the Growth Chamber Guardian or to haste through a Spellbreaker. And we might be up against the Sultai mid-range decks, so this is probably the matchup that we lose in best of 1, I would imagine. Because I don't really want to play Spellbreaker here, because I can't get in with the Guardian. I might want to do the Guardian, but I can't get in with the Firebrand or play the Spellbreaker, so it's a really weird, rough spot to be in right now. I guess I probably should Spellbreaker. We can haste it through as a 3/3. And it still goes through Seeker Squire. Seeker Squire, yet again, another one of those aggro breakers, because it's a 2-mana, 3 toughness creature. So it demands some decent removal if you're playing against mono red, which is rampant in this format. So the best thing that we could get next turn is a 1-drop, I think. We're definitely gonna ping off the Jade Light Ranger with our Firebrand before that gets the chance to get any bigger. Looks like it was gonna stay as a 2/1, but we didn't know that. And that was our best chance to actually respond to it. I think we were gonna make that trade anyway, regardless. And I guess we actually go swinging. If they want to block, we turn this into a 4/4 and we're fine with that. Because then we just Stomping Ground tap to move on. This way, I actually get to play my Spellbreaker as a 4/4. I think we do that. Ritual of Soot's the only thing I have to really worry about, and I don't think it's really going to be a thing. They run fine finality, so the board wipes that I should expect aren't really coming until turn 6. So this could be Vraska's Contempt. Vraska Golgari Queen, I guess, is a thing.
I lead the Golgari now.
Yeah.
I haven't forgotten how to destroy things.
Okay, so we could swing, double swing into that to guarantee we kill it, or I could Spellbreaker, swing at Vraska, Growth Chamber, swing at face. Then we get 4 damage in, because I'm sure they want to protect Vraska. If they don't, then we trade off with a Seeker Squire, and Vraska dies. So swing here, force this block that it has no profit, and then swing here. If they block here, then they lose Vraska, and we can 3-mana adapt and still play the next Growth Chamber. So this is just purely upside for us, I would say. I take them to 4 as well. Wow, they're just going to lose all of it. Okay. Well, we'll take the action while we can. Kill Vraska. Take them to 4. We still don't have to worry about a board wipe, so let's just play Growth Chamber Guardian. And I think they need something like Chupacabra so that they can put a body on board while removing one of ours. I think that's the best tempo swing they could make here. And then at that point we have to worry about Fine Finale. I guess they could do Wild Growth Walker into Branch Walker. That would be pretty bad, but I don't think that they've got both of those. The Hydroid Krasis. That's not really gonna cut it, is it? Because I get to swing. Everything blocks pretty nicely. Like, they get to kill Spellbreaker here, but I get to hit them for 4. Kill a Seeker Squire. I am going to adapt my Growth Chamber Guardian. I would have taken the Spellbreaker if I was them, I guess. But, I guess they take one less point and then they go Find Finality. Something like that. I feel like I have to do this, though, but I'm not going to commit to this board because I can actually win through... They're going to Find Finality me, so the only thing I really want to play is Rekindling Phoenix, and it's not really an option. I don't think they can play anything that really saves them except for that card. So there it is. Yeah, and now we commit to this board once again. So we do Growth Chamber Guardian and Rekindling Phoenix. They have to Vraska's Contempt the Phoenix, which takes them to 4, leaves them with 2 to 3 mana, and then Growth Chamber Guardian adapts to make it 4 power, which swings for lethal. Shocks it in and ends their life. I wasn't actually sure I was going to win that one. I think I just managed to pressure them enough that they weren't able to stabilize and do what they wanted to do, which is exactly what aggro wants to be doing. If it can't pressure your opponent, then they get to run free and do whatever they want and stabilize eventually. So, pretty good, pretty good. Let's go to the deck tech portion then, I guess. Alrighty then, so it's time to look over the deck and make changes based on what we've seen. And honestly, I've been pretty impressed with this list just as it is, so I'm not entirely sure that there are many changes that I want to make. The one thing that the deck is lacking in the main deck, at least for best of one, is enchantment and artifact removal. So I feel like I want to make at least one slot in this deck for that. So we have maybe 2 choices here. We have either Thrashing Brontodon, which is one that I'm actually leaning more towards. It's a 3 mana 3/4, which can pay 1 mana to sacrifice itself to destroy an artifact or enchantment. So if we add this one into the deck, it's a decent body for its mana cost. It's easily castable because we've got an even split of mana, so getting double green on turn 3 isn't difficult at all, especially if we expect to have double red on turn 4 anyway, so I think we're going to be able to manage that just fine. The other option is Cindervines as well, and you may notice that there are 3 ticks in here. It's because I've actually done the sideboard off camera, because it actually took me a while to figure out what kind of cards I wanted to add to this list to improve it, because we're basically the only matchup that we want to shore off is the control matchup, and we kind of already tech for it, but we wanted to tech a little bit more. And I think one of the other disadvantages this deck doesn't have is card advantage, so the sideboard deals with that as well. So the cut that I would actually make, and this is only really based off of Game 1 from what we saw, and Game 1 wasn't really a good indicator of what to cut, to be honest, because we kind of got mana screwed, but we did see like several hands in a row that were bad. And the one thing that we saw was there were maybe too many fight spells. So I think I'm going to make one cut of either Titanic Brawl or Thrash, and I think it has to be Brawl. One, because Brawl not only forces you to deal damage to your creatures, which might kill them if the creature is basically evenly matched with yours, which is quite likely as well in the early game, but also it's essentially just better. The Thrash threat has the utility of having threat available to make us a creature, so this isn't always a dead card in creatureless matchups. You know, this can hit planeswalkers, and it can also put a threat down on the board, whereas this one is pretty dead in that matchup, so that's something that we got to keep in mind. So that takes us back down to the 60, and I don't think anything else really needs to change about this list. I think it is perfect as it is. Even the mana base, 24, is a little high for an aggro deck, but we're not the traditional kind of aggro deck. You know, we want to be getting up to turns 4 and 5 amounts of mana, and we have plenty to spend our mana on as well. Skargan Hellkite, of course, being a mana sink there is very helpful in potential flood situations that we might find ourselves in. So let's go to the sideboard. As I mentioned, the one matchup that we're probably going to struggle with is Control, and it's mostly because they have board wipes and targeted removal. So we're kind of going to change the sideboard to reflect that a little bit. So there was a few cards in there, but I didn't really agree with most of them. There was the Shaman that was in there. Let's go to the Sunder Shaman. That was the choice for the artifact and enchantment removal. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that. It is a 4-mana 5/5, but it also needs to get combat damage in order to destroy something. So it's a 4-mana do-nothing, essentially, which is bad in this kind of format. So instead, I've actually opted for Cindervines, which is a popular one. It's a cheaper version, 2 mana, red and a green for an enchantment. It says whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to that player. So it's really good against the Nexus decks, which is still a thing in the best of 3s. So if I'm building a sideboard, I'm going to build for that kind of meta as well. It's very good for that. It also targets control, because if they counter spells, they take damage. If they try to remove Cindervines, they take damage. So there's a lot of applications for Cindervines outside of just one artifact and enchantment removal kind of situation. So you might want to consider maybe the Cindervines over the Thrashing Brontodon in the main, but I think just having this here is a little bit better because it completely depends on the matchup. You know, if we're in a very creature-focused matchup, then Thrashing Brontodon is absolutely the card I want. And, you know, best of 1 is mostly mono-red for the vast majority of it, and it's very hard to deal with for them, so it's really good at stabilizing in that sense as well. They did have 2 Gruul Harpooners in here, which I do agree with. Is a 2-mana 3/2 with Reach, so it's really good against Mono Blue Tempo, it's really good against Drakes, and it can hit a lot of flyers depending on how deep the game has gone, which, you know, green typically struggles with, but we do have, of course, flyers at the top end so that we can block a few things. But Gruul Harpooner actually allows us to fight creatures to kill them, so Mono Blue Tempo with their Storm Tamers and things like that, and their Tempershians. Gruul Harpooner can get +X/+O, where X is the number of creature cards in our graveyard, and then have it fight that creature so we can kill it. Worst case scenario, this thing is a pretty decent costed 3/2 as well. A 3/2 for 2 is very nice indeed, and comboing with the Rhythm of the Wild, we do get to give it haste, so we can maybe get that +X/+O and use that as an attack advantage as well. This thing could be swinging in as a 5/2, perhaps. So that's one thing that we could do. We also, further down the list, we have a copy of Rhythm of the Wild for the control matchup again. This is pretty much our way of winning against control in game 1. The creature spells cannot be countered is very powerful indeed, and the Riot to give haste as well to every single one of our creatures puts the pressure on. So, if we want to see this card all of the time against the control matchups, then we want to have the 4th copy of Rhythm of the Wild in here as well. In addition to that, we also want to do exactly the same thing with Rekindling Phoenix, because Kaya's Wrath is the major board wipe at the moment for the control matchups. So Rekindling Phoenix has resilience against board wipes, against everything except for Settle the Wreckage, which Spellbreaker has covered anyway. So Phoenix becomes a very hard to deal with threat that control has a tough time dealing with. They literally need either a 2-for-1, which is really good for us, or they need a Vraska's Contempt, which is premium removal, and we want them to spend that early on something as well. So, I think the final piece of the puzzle as far as control is concerned is the 3 copies of Shaper's Sanctuary. As I mentioned, this deck, if it does lose all of its creatures, then the hand will probably be empty, and we're going to be basically floundering, top decking, and losing our creatures. Shaper's Sanctuary gets around that. It's a 1 green enchantment that says whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So if our opponent uses something like Ravenous Chupacabra to target our creature, we get to draw a card. If they try to bounce it, if they're Mono Blue Tempo, or they try to tap it with their Merfolk Tricksters, then we get to draw a card there, but it's mostly here for the control matchup. If they try to cast down our creatures, we get to draw a card, replace it, and then get right back on with the pressure. So they're 1-for-1s which they're trying to get end up becoming a 1-for-0 essentially, because we get to replace that card, and as long as we don't hit a land, we've got something to get back into the game with. So 3 copies there, and if they do want to use a Mortify on Shaper's Sanctuary, then that's 1 removal spell that's not being used on our creatures as well. Direfleet Daredevil is kind of to shore up the aggro matchup, because I imagine that that's also potentially a game that we might lose. Direfleet Daredevil is a 2-mana 2/1 with First Strike. When it enters the battlefield, exile target instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard, and you may cast that card this turn. So we could take, potentially, in the control matchup, we could take our opponent's Vraska's Contempt and kill their Planeswalker with it, but the major application of this is going to be in the mono red matchups where they've got all of their jumpstart cards, their draw spells with light up the stage, their burn spells so that we can clear the way and swing through with our stuff. So it's really a lot of things that Direfleet Daredevil can do, and the first strike as well means that it is a must deal with threat in order for them to actually get through with their creatures. It's really good indeed. One copy of Collision Colossus to deal with any more additional flyers. It's very good against Mono Blue Tempo, very good against Drakes. It'll hit Niv Mizzet, that kind of thing. And if we don't want to use it as a collision, we do have Colossus as well, which also works significantly well with the deck. It's another way of pushing through extra damage. So Gruul colors, and it gives +4/+2 and trample to a creature. So push through those final points if we really want to. If our opponent just chumps with a 1/1 on our 5/5 or something like that, we can swing a hell of a lot of damage through and they won't expect it. One final addition is an iffy one. I'm running 2 copies of Deathgorge Scavenger in here as a bit of life gain, but also graveyard hate, because it's something that our deck doesn't currently have, either in the main or in the side. So 3 mana for a 3/2. When it enters a battlefield or attacks, you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature is exiled this way, which is easy enough to do against mono red, and for the Sultai mid-range matchups as well, it shuts down their finalities, at least to a certain extent. We gain 2 life, which means we can blank 1 burn spell from the mono red decks, and if we get to attack in again, we get to repeat the process. If it's a non-creature, then we get to pump up the damage, which is exactly what we want to be doing against the control matchups. We want to be pushing as much damage as humanly possible rather than gaining life. So it has a lot of applications in both matchups, so it completely depends on the things that you end up cutting. If you've got enough space for this, then this will also probably come in versus the control matchups. You can even hit your opponent's Chemisters Insight and things like that, so it's very useful. As you may notice, I don't actually have 2 copies of this one. And the downside to sideboarding, of course, is unfortunately the sad reality that a lot of the cards that are sideboard tech worthy are actually rares. So if you are on a budget, I do apologise, but I'm trying to build a sideboard here that is the best that this deck could possibly see, and I think this is exactly what you want to be looking towards anyway. Work towards this list, and I imagine that you'll do just fine in the best of 3s with this list. It is super sweet, so thank you very much to Thoughts in Flight for sending me the list. I greatly appreciate it. If you want your deck to be featured on the channel in the future, then you can leave it down in the description, in the comment section below. You can send it to me via email or by Patreon, or even on the Discord. There are so many ways that you can send it to me. If you are a Twitch subscriber or a patron, you will get priority in the queue as well. So Thoughts in Flight is actually a Twitch subscriber, so he gets to go first. And I do have a big line of decks that I have planned as well, so if you have submitted one in the past, I do have your list currently ready and waiting. So we're going to do, I think, 2 subscriber decks this week, and going to try and keep doing that every single week. So hope you guys enjoy. If you want to get the priority list as well, it's completely optional. You can subscribe on Twitch or on Patreon. Let me know when you submit your list, if you do it outside of the Patreon feed or the Discord feed, that you are one of those, and you will get pushed forward a wee bit. So hope you guys have enjoyed this one. If you have any suggestions about the deck, if you liked it, let me know down in the comments section below. I'd like to hear what you guys think about the sideboard, because I'm not entirely sure if it is perfect, but I think it's about where I'd want it to be anyway. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like, subscribe, hit that little bell icon, you know the drill, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.